Hello, my name is Celia Bray and I'm a psychologist and owner of the business Somatic Psychology. So one question is, how does the body remember our stories from the past, and how do those stories show up later on in life? Like, why do they keep cycling around? Why do we keep having these patterns? And one of the clear ways to look at that also is through trauma. Things like post-traumatic stress disorder, where there's a particular incident that happened that was highly traumatic, and then that's triggered a shift in people's whole experience of life and themselves afterwards. It can be abuse of some kind, it can be a major accident, it can be being involved in war or conflict. But the same principle applies whether you've been through a major trauma like that or just going through life. Our body remembers what happens to us, and particularly when we're overwhelmed. So let's lay out how that looks, and then therefore how we can heal it, or what needs to happen to heal it. So let's take PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's just say something happens to someone when they're really young, or at any point. But we can start with something that happened when someone was really young. Perhaps it was that parents split up when they were young, or they were involved in family violence in the house, and that happened in there was a particular incident that happened. Like, PTSD is usually a single incident, but trauma can happen over time as well. So both of those will change your physiology. So what happens is, when you are in that stress environment as a child, you don't have the resources to deal with it. You're a child. You haven't got all the resources that you have as an adult. And so what happens is, you're in an environment that's you have an overwhelming experience in that situation, and you feel all these sensations that go through your body because your cortisol levels are raised, your fight or flight gets activated. So all of the biochemistry of stress comes up. And in that moment, your mind, your cognitive thinking starts to just switch off. Because when we're flooded with those stress hormones and fight or flight responses, or collapse is another one, where you just freeze, where you just can't move, you feel immobilized. It's the same principle of overwhelm and then disconnect from the executive function in your mind, because your executive function just can't operate at the same time. So then what happens is, the body gets this imprint, if you like, of this traumatic experience. And we feel those sensations, but we can't do anything about it in that moment. As a child, you might not have been able to get away from that situation, or you may have been it's just powerless in some way. And so to survive, we switch off and disconnect from ourselves in some way. And in that moment of disconnection, and trying to shut down our physiological experience, because all the sensations, that just too much going on, we can't process it, we shut it down and disconnect from it. And then the body can't continue the processing of that. It's like you're frozen, or you're in flight mode, you're just in, and you can't actually escape in reality. So you end up with this half processed experience where you're there, but you can't kind of complete it. You can't let it go. It's not safe enough to let it go. You don't have the resources to let it go either. You can't kind of shake it out and go, oh gosh, that was terrible. Oh, thank goodness that's over. I'm going to be okay. No, you can't do that. And in a physiological way, you need to do that at the time. So it gets like locked up in a little room in your body and remembered. But then your mind might say, I don't like this, and disconnects from it. So it gets locked in this, like locked in the attic, if you like, in your physiological system. And then it can't finish its processing, if you like, it can't be released. So what happens is, let's say it was an abuse situation, and as a child, you were abused in some way, either physically or sexually. What happened? And then you get into an environment where, as an adult, you meet somebody who might just be very normal, or you might be in a situation where you're wanting to get into a relationship, but you just suddenly, you feel flooded with these sensations. You're like, what is going on here? Like, I can't connect with this person. I can't just be myself because these sensations come flooding up. And then you get anxious, or you feel like you need to run, or you get depressed, or you dissociate, which means you just disconnect from yourself. Because those sensations that are locked in that little room in your body somewhere, could be your chest, your stomach, wherever, it could be all over, could be in your head, suddenly they get activated and they become overwhelming again, because your body thinks that it's still, that's because it never processed it at the time, because you couldn't actually finish that event, if you like, or you couldn't access that event without feeling overwhelmed. It's unhealed, and so it keeps coming up in your life, and therefore it controls your decisions. You're like, okay, I can't go out with that person because I just can't, and I can't go out to that event because I'll feel anxious, and I can't, and you start to have to limit your life. And what also can happen is you feel like you just feel not quite, you feel disconnected from yourself, and you feel like it's really hard to access joy. You feel a bit like you can't be present. Like, there's some of the signs that, there's stuff in here that's actually unresolved. So it's how the body processes, if you like, or fails to process trauma in the moment, and then how it acts out later on. So in terms of healing trauma, it's really important to include the body. So we need to find ways for you to be able to safely access the sensations in the body that you've been avoiding your whole life. Now, you might think right now, I'm freak out, not a chance in hell, they're way too much. And that is exactly why we're stuck. And so it's not about just exposing ourselves to those sensations again and getting overwhelmed again. It's actually learning how to find safe places to experience sensations before we go anywhere near that trauma experience. But at some point, that touching on the trauma is actually what's going to set you free, because it'll allow the body to go, oh, actually, I am safe now. I'm not in that situation anymore. That situation was in the past. It was horrible. But now I'm resourced and I'm safe, and I can let that go. And talking about it alone is not enough. We need to do the work in the body. So I hope that was helpful. And that's a bit about how the body feels the trauma and experience in the moment, how it gets stuck, and also how it plays out in our future and how we can heal it. All right. Thank you.